Welcome back to another edition. And I am delighted to have Ed Coambs with me. He's kind of a special guy. Um, I call Ed the gold standard of financial therapists. He is a CFP, certified financial planner. He's also a licensed therapist. And he's also the author of The Healthy Love and Money Way, which talks a lot about couples and money and something called the attachment theory. But Ed is just, he's the real deal. And I think, Ed, there's probably, I don't know, less than two handfuls of people that come to this work with your experience and qualification. And I think that's awesome. So welcome.
Well, Rick, it's an honor to be here. I certainly enjoy listening to your podcast. I always gain insights from you and your guests. And so it's nice to be a guest today and to share the wisdom that I've been able to cultivate over, I don't know, 20 years, I guess, at this point.
Wow. What? Give us the short version of how you got into this work, because you came to this field from a very unusual field.
Yes, right. And that's why I was like, well, when do I date this fully? Because really, like, my informal exploration of this topic started in a firehouse. I was professionally a firefighter right out of high school. And when I wasn't running into burning buildings or going to car accidents, we were sitting around the fire station and the guys would complain about their wives and money. And so, yeah, as a young, impressionable guy, I was like, well, man, that sucks. I don't want to have that problem. And, some of the guys were working with the retirement account specialist to save extra money beyond the pension. And yeah, I just remember this one guy saying, yeah, I've got $100,000 with Clark. Mind you, I'm making $30,000 a year. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's a lot of money. That sounds great. Like, how do I get there? And so, I didn't know really a stock from a bond or mutual fund or any of that stuff. I mean, I think I had a little personal finance class in high school, but nominal. So that sparks this whole curiosity about personal finance and building wealth and how does this happen? And so I just start diving in and reading all the books, like, Buying Your First Home for Dummies and Susie Orman's whatever book and Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover and yada yada, all these people that were prolific back in the early 2000s. And I leave firefighting and become a financial planner because I've learned about this field. And, they make great money and I can help people with money. And I get married, I get my certified financial planner, I get my MBA because I'm going to be this brilliant money guy now. And then I'm partnered with my wife, who is truly actually brilliant, like certifiably. High school valedictorian, like I've had to work very hard. I think she has some innate intelligence advantage. Different story. Anyhow, this story is going to get too long, so let me see if I can get more concise here. I come to her with my brilliant MBA, CFP ideas. She doesn't respond with a big smile and a hug and, oh my God, Ed, this is the best information. I'm so glad this is where we want to go with life. She still hasn't done that, mind you. We're getting closer maybe to that, but I was disappointed because I had become the money expert and I felt like we should be doing these things. And oh, by the way, certain things were going on in my family that were not great relationally, financially. And there was some stuff really wonky happening on her side of the family, relationally and financially. And I was like, we didn't talk about these issues like divorce or parents supporting adult children financially, or, heavens forbid we admit that one of the adult children had attempted suicide before I came into the picture, that there was addictions in the family. Like, we didn't talk about any of that stuff in MBA CFP world. And yet that seemed to be having a pretty big impact on how people were making money decisions. And so I went back to school to become a couples therapist, not having really benefited from therapy. I'd done a little bit after a friend of mine committed suicide, but the lights didn't really go on. Excuse me. But I got into the field of couples therapy thinking they would help me figure out how people and families work. And I got through that training and pretty quickly realized they never wanted to talk about money. So that was a bit disappointing because that's what I wanted to talk about. They want to talk about issues with family conflict and divorce and infidelity and, how to diagnose mental health issues. And I was like, I'm not interested in any of that stuff. I just want to help people with money. Um, but, I got out and I found the Financial Therapy Association, Rick, which you had helped spearhead and get launched, I think only probably a couple of years before I got connected. And really between you and a couple of other key founders really got my nose pointed deeper into how do we integrate this, and ended up at Kansas State thinking I was going to get a PhD and really be this master financial therapist. And oh my God, from firefighter to third graduate degree, what the heck? But it's been a journey of personal inquiry and questioning and learning. And the more you learn, the more you realize you don't really know what's going on. You just have a thought that you do. And so it's really a humbling process to get here. And I think most people experience me as a pretty nice, thoughtful guy, but I have my own outsized ego and arrogance that lives just below the surface. And so I think it's just really about, at this point in my life now, and the journey is like, how do I live authentically with money? Like all this financial planning knowledge and experience 20 years later, like, oh, our balance sheet is well better than $100,000. And what I see so clearly now is no matter where you're at on your financial journey, you have a psychological relationship with money. And most of us culturally think that if we cross some number threshold, whether it be income or assets, we'll be kind of free of money anxieties, fears, dare I say, even money shame. But kind of almost counterintuitively, your money anxieties, fears, and shame spots just kind of grow with you and your wealth. And you're constantly trying to figure out how to work with the shadow side or the hard part of being human, because it doesn't take us straight into the land of Shangri-La, unfortunately.
Yes, that is so true, Ed, that I remember when I was sitting at a workshop with George Kinder, who kind of opened the door for me back in 1999, 2000. And he was interviewing a second generation wealth person. And he was talking about all of his burdens and trials and how all the guilt and all the shame. And I remember sitting in the audience thinking, get a grip, dude. You've got tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and you've got shame, and you're up there whining. And obviously, that was in my early days. And roll forward 25 years, and I'm now working with people who are in the same category, saying I must be the most miserable, wealthy person in the world. I hate this money. I hate this world. And I get it, fortunately, today. Yeah. And can have compassion and understand. Well, now I'm going on. Ted Coambs and I used to have a lady that had more than enough. Was a patriarch of a major city, come down to our workshops. And she would talk about how it is living with and having more than enough. Mm-hmm. And she popped her head into our little group of 8 once, said, "Hi, I'm here. I'll be talking to you later tonight." She kind of turns to leave, and she turns back and says, I don't know who's more miserable, the ultra rich or the poor. Mm-hmm. And she kind of pauses and thinks. She says, but at least the poor have each other.
Yeah.
Wow. Uh-huh. I never forgot that. Well, Ed, you've had an amazing journey, and you are the poster child of someone who's walked the walk and not just has talked the talk. And I remember a presentation you did, I think it was in San Diego at the FTA.
It was,
and maybe not.
which presentation it was.
Which one?
My hunch is it was in Austin, but I don't
Okay. Well, I
know.
knew it was that direction.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And it was stunning, just your personal journey. It was stunning. So hats off to you for not just getting all of the knowledge, but applying that to your own life.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think what you're really alluding to, and we're probably building into this in this conversation, is that one of the biggest shockers of this whole journey is that um, our trauma histories have a profound impact on our relationship with money. Sometimes in a very one-for-one kind of way, but oftentimes in a more of a complex constellation kind of way. Like you got to ping off of multiple stars to see how this set of experiences leads to this kind of response with money. And so what I'm really alluding to is, I got through grad school and I had learned all this stuff, and I was like, wait, if half of what they're talking about here that I just learned is true, I've got some stuff to figure out for myself. And I'm a person that takes things pretty literally, and I'm one that takes things pretty to heart. And so if you tell me I need to do something, I'm going to try to do that. And so this whole concept of doing your own work was something that I took to heart. I was like, I got to do my own work. I don't know what that even means, but I'm going to do it. I will figure it out, and so really in the most simple terms for listeners, doing our own work is about self-reflection, being curious and aware that we have defense mechanisms that protect us from looking at parts of ourself or parts of our experience. And that part of the journey to health is having an integrated memory of who you are across your lifespan. And that you can see, this is my old business term, but you can really do a SWOT analysis on your life. You can see your strengths and weaknesses. You can see your opportunities and your threats. That's that fun integration of business and psychology. But people that are mentally unwell or struggling usually are over-indexed on either their strengths without seeing their weaknesses, or they're over-indexed on their weaknesses without seeing their strengths.
That's a nice frame.
Right. And, that opportunities, threats piece is when they look out into the world, do they just see a world of opportunities? That's kind of Pollyanna. But if they only see threats, then that's the trauma narrative, the other side of the trauma narrative, saying like, the world's dangerous, it's scary, I can't possibly go out there. Well, that's an overgeneralization also, which is what our brains do when they're not well integrated or reflective, is they over-index in certain quadrants. And so building to this whole attachment theory, the psychology of attachment is all about how our relationships help regulate us, help us see ourselves and see other relationships. And because we all have early primary relationships that set the tone for our quality of caregiving, our sense of who we are, whether we're safe, lovable, acceptable, or we're unworthy, unacceptable, unlovable, can't be known, can't be understood. And those experiences get internalized into the neural structure of our brain and our nervous system. And it's our metaphorical lens or glass that we look through for every relationship. And that's what's driving our money decisions.
So that sounds pretty deep.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Wired into us. I mean, really, really wired into us. And there's a couple ways, a couple lenses that we can view the world that relate to attachment theory. Could you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah. Well, let me start with a story that will then set up this, right? Is recently I'm working on some of my own job transitions, and what am I doing with Healthy Love and Money, and where am I going? And so as humans, right, when we work through our life transitions, a lot of them have a financial component directly or indirectly associated with it.
Right.
Right. And so that starts to stir up all these thoughts about ourselves and what are other people going to think of us, especially our primary partners, i.e. our spouses, sometimes our kids, sometimes our parents. Sometimes it gets into our friends and our colleagues too. But depending on what our attachment lens is, will determine how we experience things. And so I woke up kind of my brain anxious and spinning around a bit, like, oh my God, this could go this way, this way. And I get up and my wife's in the bathroom getting ready. Or no, I actually had said, hey, hon, can you just hold me? Because that's a regulatory experience. And so she held me. I got calm. Then I got up 10 minutes, 15 minutes later. I said, hey, here's what was going on in my brain. Because it's really hard to say what's going on in your brain when your nervous system is activated. It usually comes out kind of aggressive or not so friendly. So better to get your nervous system a little more calm, and then you can express what's going on usually more effectively. But I started to tell her, and I love my wife dearly, but she didn't respond in a way that I needed. And so all of a sudden I went, crash, shame. Oh my God, she thinks I suck and I'm not doing the right things, and spinning up this whole story because I'm anxiously attached, right? So this is one of the 4 categories, is I'm always monitoring for disappointment in the relationship, over indexed on disappointing, under indexed on like seeing approval and acceptance. So it just doesn't take much for her to say something that then sends me into I'm not acceptable around this job transition opportunity I'm working on. So now I have all this acquired knowledge. It didn't stop the process from unfolding, but it did help me move through it more gracefully and get reconnected both to myself and with my wife. And so this is where knowledge about how this stuff works doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stop it from unfolding. Right. It just means we might be able to recognize where we're at in the process and what we need to do to get back square.
There's a scripture that I like that I think brings that out. It's be doers of the word and not hearers only.
Yes.
And I think it talks about the knowing in the head and the long journey, 18-inch journey to the heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think the thing that's really reframed in my mind as I've studied more physiology is understanding just how fast our nervous system is and how slow our thought system is.
Yes.
Right. And so if people can just know that about how we're wired, is a lot of people feel like they get so hard on themselves for not controlling their thoughts, not controlling their emotional reactions. And it's like, I have a client that says, well, I've got to stop. I've got to catch the stimulus response. I'm like, yo, bro, like the stimulus is happens in 100 milliseconds, and it takes 300 milliseconds for your brain to recognize that it's happened. So our nervous system is continuously monitoring the environment for us proactively. We don't have to ask our nervous system to say, am I safe, not safe? It's just doing it. That's its primary job is to be looking around in the world and making sure that hey, there's no lion's going to attack me. I'm not going to. And so when we can just understand that, I think that allows for more grace and patience with ourselves. And so, right, one piece of this whole system of understanding is what's called our attachment styles. And it's a lens for trying to frame how do humans experience relationships. And there's 4 broad categories, right? Secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. And if you go super nerd mode, you might hear different words about these things, but I think on the whole, it's pointing to the same thing, right? The fundamental question is, how do humans experience relationships? We're simplifying it to say 4 primary ways. And usually the next inevitable question people say, well, are all my relationships exactly the same? No. Right? Your experience of different people can fall in different categories, but you probably have a primary way that you experience relationships. So let's talk about what those 4 primary ways are. Secure is all about, I feel mostly comfortable with myself, that I can meet my own emotional relational needs, and I feel comfortable that I can turn to somebody else with emotional or relational needs. And when I say emotional relational needs, is I feel really sad or scared about this job opportunity coming up in the money context.
Right.
As adults, right? Or, hey, I'm so excited about this new job opportunity, or I just got this great bonus, or something else good happened to me And someone will show up and match and acknowledge that, not minimize it or dismiss it. Right. And they know how to find those types of folks and they can be connected with it. That creates relational security.
There you go. Yeah.
Relational anxiety, and usually your sense of self-worth is balanced with other people. I'm valuable, you're valuable.
Mm-hmm.
This sets the stage for when you go to anxious attachment. I'm less valuable, you're more valuable. I don't think that you can really know or understand me, but I'm going to work really hard to try to get you to engage with me and understand my emotional world. But even if you do a good job, like I just shared in my own story, I might still not feel it. I might miss it. And so part of the therapeutic journey is being able to recognize that process and then figure out how do I experience that more often. Now this stuff is getting baked into us from, some argue, in utero,
Yeah.
like inside the womb. Some say it's post-birth, but it's, first 3 years of life for sure. It's getting cemented in there pretty solid. So that anxious side, though, is counterbalanced by the avoidant side, which basically says, I've learned that relationships are not satisfying. People can't understand my needs. So kind of like the anxious attachment, but their response is arm's length distance, push you away, not let you in. Why would I do that? And it makes perfect sense, right? You're going to go avoidant or anxious, one of those two directions, if relationships are not attuning to where you're at and what you need in this time and space. Now, most humans are pretty relationally consistent in the way they show up and engage relationships, so we end up there. But this last group are when we get to live with humans that are very inconsistent in their availability. And that leaves us with a disorganized attachment. And it means our brains have a very hard time predicting what we can expect relationally. But most listeners can probably stop and think about the 3 or 4 people you interact with the most. And you're like, yep, mom is pretty consistently this way. She's warm, she's thoughtful, she's caring. Oh, she's a little cruel, she's a little harsh. And she's pretty consistently that way. She's kind of checked out, unavailable, a large check on the time. But this is like where those larger major mental health issues like drug addiction, alcohol, psychotic issues the mind is not well organized. And so our brains unfortunately get really mixed messages. Fortunately, that's a pretty small percentage of the total population, somewhere 5-10%. And I realize in large numbers that becomes a lot of people. But I say all that to say is how we make sense out of what people are doing with their money. Like that's a big question. And the attachment theory for me gives a lens to try to make sense out of how people are going to experience their relationship and then how they're going to navigate the money side of things. So that's a whole lot. I'll just pause.
I love it because I can nerd out on this stuff, and I'm just thinking, when you're in a coupleship, you've got the combinations of all those.
Yes.
And many ways that people can show up. They could both be anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, one or the other.
Yeah.
That can get pretty complex.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not. It's funny, as much as I'm in finance and all that, I can't do permutations in my head. But if we think about it, right, four quadrants, 4 styles, 2 people, what's the permutations on that? I think it's 16. Is that right? That sound right? Someone can check us and send me an email and say, Ed, this is it, or I'll just chat GPT it later. But yeah, right. You raise a really great point, is each person brings their own attachment lens and set of experiences. And, attachment is, when we think about it in those old 4-style quadrants, it's not a discrete, like you are secure. It's like degrees of security,
Yes.
degrees of relational anxiety, degrees of avoidance. And so, some might be far more relationally secure. Some might be closer to the edge of anxiety or avoidance. So that's part of what colors all of this. And that's why working with a professional that understands it can really help you navigate where you're at in that spectrum and move closer towards more security. Because that's the good news, is humans' brains are malleable, Neuroplasticity is the technical name for it. But what it takes is new relational experiences. And this sounds a little harsh, but you got to hang out with higher quality folks. You got to hang out with people that have more emotional maturity. You got to hang out with people that have higher degrees of self-reflection and an ability to tolerate their imperfections, if that's where you want to go. If you want to stay experiencing relationships the way you want, then keep hanging out with the people you've been spending time with. And I don't say that to be harsh. And this is part of what makes growth and change so challenging, is we get familiar and comfortable with the people we spend time with.
Yeah.
But our brains adapt to those at which we spend time with also.
And that goes to something that we've heard all of our lives. If you have 5 close friends, make sure they're all smarter than you are.
Yes, right. Absolutely. That is.
And talks about the financial comfort zone that we did the work with Ted Klontz on, hanging out in what's familiar.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is a huge, huge thing. And I'll share even just from my own story, right? Is because I've lived in different social worlds. I've always lived primarily in the United States, but I've lived in very different professional contexts. And so anybody that's lived in different worlds understands immediately what I'm going to say, which is people experience money differently. And it's kind of almost one of those no-duh statements. But when you live with a group of firefighters and how they see money and experience it, it's one thing. When I went into my MBA world and corporate world and how we talked about money and thought about it, different language system, different set of words, different ways of thinking about what's important. That was a hard transition psychologically. My brain had a hard time reconciling these worlds. Then I went back to the therapy world, and it was like my brain hurt. I have literally said I felt like I'm getting punched, because like therapy world doesn't want to talk about money. They don't want to talk about strategy. Right. They don't want to talk about return on investment. They don't want to talk about how to build or manage wealth. That's not what their focus is. Different culture. And so, as I've come back and spend more and more time in the financial planning world, they have no problem talking about, in some ways, making more money, being profitable.
Right.
But they have a harder time talking about the human side and the soft side and the intangible and less measurable. It's actually pretty easy to measure most human stuff too. You just put a subjective scale on it, 1 to 10. It's really not that hard. I think we make it hard, but it's like we just put some subjective scale to it and say, how intense is this feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? Okay, great. Now I know. Now let's measure it against a lot of people. Oh, okay. Here's the average feeling around whatever. I know. I digress.
Then you got this big middle space.
Yeah.
And who fills that?
Yeah, well, that's right. Why this work of the Financial Therapy Association is saying, like, how do we bring these two cultures together and create a completely new culture?
Exactly. Ed, we are out of time. We haven't even gotten started.
No.
We'll have to come back and continue on. But I so much appreciate the work you've done and what you bring to the table. Where can people find you, read about you, experience your work?
Yeah, well, I think the easiest way is healthyloveandmoney.com is my website. I have loads and loads of blogs and podcast episodes. You mentioned my book, The Healthy Love and Money Way, which is on Amazon. And I do need to put a new plug out there because you're in this book also, right? But my newest book with my partner, Kara Crossway Brindle, is called Becoming a Financial Therapist. So if you're listening to this and you're like, how do I do this thing, financial therapy? What have other people's journeys been like? Becoming a financial therapist has Rick's story in it, has my story in it, has 18 other people's stories. So if you want to go super nerdy on this stuff, there's more and more resources for you too. And if you're a couple saying like, oh my God, this was just overwhelming, can this guy not make it too complicated? I promise with my clients, I'm very gentle, try to be easy with my language. So, but when I get with a friend, I just kind of nerd out and go crazy.
I appreciate you nerding out with us today. Thank you so much for being with us, Ed.
Yeah. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it.